What is up, you amazing people? It is I, Nima, and man, it feels like forever since I've done a video. I'm really glad to be back, and I had a whole list of things I was going to do last week. A lot of house cleaning, so to speak. Best of 2023. And I still plan on doing those videos. But for anyone who is curious about the last week or so, stay to the end of the video and I will give you some insight on what my life has been like. But I also have one other thing to ask of you guys, and that is, please give me your opinions, your thoughts. What was the best indie of 2023 for you? And you know what? The game doesn't even have to have dropped in 2023. Let's just say it's a game that you experienced for the first time in 2023, and it's an indie title. Anything in that comment section below involving indies and your favorite games of 2023, let me know, let the community know. That way maybe other people can discover these games too. So let's get on with the list of games that came out in 2023 that happen to be indies that I think are the best of the year. Now, I will say one thing. I gotta be honest, this is an incredibly long best of list, so it's gonna be a lot of games and short descriptions. Anyway, let's just get started. By the way, these are in no particular order, just all the best indies of 2023. So let's start off with the game called Cocoon. Yes, Cocoon, created by the same team that made Limbo and Inside. These games are very dark, dystopian, puzzle-solving, side-scrolling style games, and honestly, a lot of people love them. So when Cocoon was released, we were kind of thinking that the game would be a certain type of game, and in fact, it's almost the opposite. Very vibrant, colorful, at times even kind of playful. Not nearly as disturbing as I would say Limbo or Inside is. And in fact, where those games seem to almost celebrate death, Cocoon sort of celebrates life. And it's a really cool concept to think of when you're thinking about all these games as a whole. I absolutely love Cocoon. Also, from a performance stance, when you're jumping in and out of these worlds and literally doing it in the blink of an eye, it's incredibly impressive, especially on the Nintendo Switch. So for the next game, we have one that I think a lot of people are going to disagree with, and that's fine, but Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. I know this game came out last year on the PS5 or even the year before. It's been out for a while, but it did just come out this year for the Switch. It is an indie, and if I'm being honest, it's fun. They've done a really good job of porting that game over to the Switch. And for a lot of people who really love the series, it is great that it is now portable and on the Nintendo Switch. Some of us forget that not everybody has every console. So for me, I still consider this to count for an indie game of 2023 on the Nintendo Switch. Now next up, we have a game that is a sequel to a very loved Metroidvania, and that is Blasphemy 2. Now I know that this sequel wasn't as well received as the first game. A lot of fans felt like they could have done things different or better. I really didn't get a whole sense of exactly what the main complaint was, but I do know that there was a number of people who said it just wasn't as good as the first one. And that might be true, but I still feel like this game is in that top echelon of best indies of 2023. And I mean, it delivered on what it was. It was a little bit more of the same, maybe a little bit more on the accessibility side of it, which I know a whole lot of like the hardcore guys don't like that, but you gotta understand that if no one can play your game, then it's not going to sell, so who's going to buy it? And then why make the game? So, you know, it's a give and take. It's a give and take for sure. And if I'm honest, I can't even say that I for sure can say that this game is easier than the first one. To me, they're both still pretty difficult. This one was just a little bit more accessible as far as like not getting lost. The boss fights and stuff like that were still pretty difficult, so I don't know. So next up, we have a very controversial one, and that is Dave the Diver. Does it fall as an indie or not? It was basically the sister company of an incredibly wealthy company, but with all of the monopolization, the buying out of, every studio, I think we're going to see this happen more often. And I don't know, we can't say what the finances are of any of these studios yet. I do understand that keyboard warrior type is going to say, yeah, but think about the single dev team who's still making a game from his mom's basement. And you know what? I agree with you. I would definitely give that person an edge over somebody who has a full team behind them and then billionaires behind them. But I still feel like we have to celebrate Dave the Diver for something. Honestly, it's a great game. It was way out there, out of the box. Who would think that running a sushi shop at night and fishing during the day and meeting mer people and having all these different wild adventures would be such a great idea? And the thing is, I want to celebrate that because I want the game itself to be celebrated. I don't want it to get lost in the weeds. I understand that there's a lot of controversy around finances and different studios studios and companies. But yeah, in the midst of all of that, I don't want to send a wrong message that this wasn't a great game and something that we need more of, not less of. And also, I have to say, I don't know how big of a controversy it really is. You ever have someone come up to you and corner you about some weird conspiracy that you've never heard of, but they feel like everybody knows every detail behind it? And you're just there like, okay, Uncle Brian, yeah, I get it. Wendy's is using mind control to make sure that the Republicans win so they can summon the god of sun. I don't know. I hope it's not the situation like that where most people have no idea what I'm even talking about. Anyway, though, Dave the Diver, great game. Definitely on this list or a list of one of the best games of 2023. And it just so happens that Dave the Diver has a crossover with my next game, and that is Dredge. Now, Dredge is a Lovecraftian style horror game, which I think is a very difficult thing to capture because, that Lovecraft style is more about the reader, the person experiencing the situation having a fear of the unknown, and they have to create that unknown. So being able to do that in a video game is phenomenal, and I think they really hit the nail on the head with this game. If you haven't played Dredge, it's totally worth your time. An amazing game. I just have to hurry up through this list because I'm running out of time, and I still have a lot of games to go. Next up is A Space for the Unbound. I talked about this recently, and I absolutely love this game. It kind of reminds me of Shenmue, just in the fact that it's charming and there's a lot of life sim to the game, but honestly, this game has a lot of meat on the bone when it comes to story and dialogue. It's a fantastic, charming, cozy game that is also has its own twists and turns that is definitely worth it. I'll say that. Now, moving on, we have one of my favorite games of the year, and that is Thirsty Suitors. Not only did I love the game, I really liked the character design. Just saying that. I don't know what that says about me. Definitely my type of girl, but the game itself is really good. It reminds me a lot of Scott Pilgrim, but with its own twist. It's a turn-based RPG / dating sim / free ride Tony Hawk skateboard experience / cooking simulator. It puts a lot of things together that maybe could have been a disaster, but ends up being like an incredibly fun experience. If you haven't played Thirsty Suitors, it's definitely worth your time. And for me, it is one of my top games of 2023. Next, we have SteamWorld Build. This game was awesome. It's so much fun. And I can't go into all the details of why this game is cool. I'm just going to say, it definitely deserves a place on this list, and I absolutely adore it. Now, we have another game that's been forgotten, it seems like, and that is a Metroidvania-style game by the name of Gunbrella, where you are kind of an old-school badass who's trying to figure out what is going on with this world. It is quickly dilapidating, and while you have your trusty Gunbrella, that is probably the only key to finding out what happened to your wife and how she was murdered? Who murdered her? All of this takes off into an incredibly deep, fun experience that I absolutely adored, and I can't believe more people aren't talking about Gunbrella. It's like it just sort of didn't exist, and that sucks because it was a really good game. Next up is War Tales. I talked about War Tales briefly. This is a game without a story. This is a game where you can just control the narrative completely. You can take a group of warriors, create them from scratch, essentially, and you can play the game however you want. Completely open world. There is no real narrative except for to survive. Now, this game did launch with a ton of bugs and a lot of issues for the Switch, but they have worked on the game. I don't know if I would say it's 100% there, but it's definitely worth your money now and definitely worth an experience. There is still some way to go, but definitely one of those games that I think in a year we're going to look back and be like, this is it. This is an amazing game. Now onto another game that a lot of people have forgotten existed. It's this little unknown indie by the name of Sea of Stars. Yes, the game that made every AAA company wonder what they were doing wrong, and how Mario, Pikmin, Sonic, even Zelda, or Final Fantasy itself got overlooked by this indie darling. Sea of Stars is the true love letter to old school RPGs with an amazing dialogue and incredibly deep yet fun story. It's one of those games that keeps things light even though it's pretty dark at the end of the day. It's such a great game, such a great experience. It's well worth your time and money, and the thing is I'm not even being that hyperbolic when I say that this game was in many people's games of the year. In one of the best years of gaming in general, honestly, I think we have to look at that. 2023 might be the best year in gaming, and Sea of Stars might wear the crown of the best game of the year. In many people's eyes it does anyway, and is a really great game. I thoroughly enjoyed this game. One of my favorites of the year, definitely deserves a spot here. I hate to do this, but now we are going into a speed round because I still have a lot of games on my list and we don't have a lot of time to get through them. So first off is Adore. This was a great game that was almost like a Pokemon / action adventure. I don't know, you gotta check it out. It's a really good game. Bomb Rush Cyberfunk, the spiritual successor to Jet Set Radio, and I know Jet Set Radio is coming back, but I hope Bomb Rush Cyberfunk comes back as well because it did its own thing, and it's a really fun, interesting, creative game that is definitely worth your time. Next up, Break Sword DX. This is a very weird game that I just thoroughly enjoyed. It is almost like one of those games where you have 1 second to act, and if you act wrong, then you're dead, and you have to restart the whole thing, but it's fun. It's totally cool. It very low on the graphics, but a really cool game. Bat Boy, another game that I really enjoyed. This was like one of my favorite Metroidvania style 2D side-scroller type games. I don't know exactly what you call it. I guess it would be a side-scroller if I'm being honest. Great game, a lot of fun, so good. Under Dungeon, another one that really surprised me, came out of nowhere. If I'm being honest, the team that produces it is kind of hit or miss. And so when they made Under Dungeon, I was really excited at what they had done. And this was a great game. Another one that has been forgotten in the sands of time, yet definitely deserves a lot of attention, is Trek to Yomi. It's a stylistic action horror samurai combat game that is just really cool. It's so hard to explain why it is so good. What part of it is you are fighting the undead and you're coming back from hell. At the same time, there is some level of hope to it, and yet it is in a very dark world. Absolutely adore this game. It's so worth your time. Another game that probably no one's ever heard of, Meg's Monster. Now this game is super creative, very heavy on dialogue, a lot of storytelling elements. Yeah, there is some combat, very slight combat, but it's there. Yeah, it's more of a turn-based RPG, but again, the story is where this game lives and breathes, and I gotta be honest, this is one of those games that brought a tear to my eye at the end. So good. It does such an amazing job of telling a story and getting you emotionally involved. Figment 2. Another game that I really love that just seemed to kind of fall away by the wayside. Yeah, it's a fantastic game having to deal with mental health. And you play the characters who are actually living inside of the person's brain. And I think they do a really good job of making it its own world, yet also explaining what's going on with the human who's going through these mental problems. Road 96 Mile Zero. Now, Road 96 is one of my favorite games. This game really got me back into that like Telltale type game. It does a really great job of giving you options and really making you sweat out the decisions. And Mile Zero is like the prequel to Road 96, and they did a great job with it. It just, there again, got overlooked. It's a fantastic game. Both of those games are so worth your time. Like, you should definitely give them a shot if you haven't. They're their own experience. Now, another game, and the cheapest one on my list, by the way, Vampire Survivors. Now, this one seemed to just create its own category of game. Hey, how could you forget that this game exists? And I know there has been many variations over the years, but Vampire Survivors just sort of wears the crown because it did it right. And so many people have enjoyed it. This is like a twin-stick shooter where you're basically just going as long as you can. You're trying to outlast the clock. You have hordes of enemies coming down on you, and you're just running from them as you're auto-attacking, and you're creating other diversions to destroy all of these enemies. Great game. Now, another one, and this is one of the last ones on my list, is Labyrinth of Zangetsu. I really like this game. It's a dungeon crawler. It's very black and white. It's a horror RPG that I think isn't done very often anymore. Now, there was a time when you had games like Kudelka, Shadowheart, a lot of that, like, horror / RPG combined, and I mean like traditional RPG, and I don't see those as much. There are a few, sure, but this one I think really did it right because the game just felt unsettling the entire time, and you were always worried about your characters dying because it literally cost you a lot to bring them back. Absolutely love this game. It's fantastic. Now, my indie game of 2023, it's a game called Wargroove 2. I absolutely love Wargroove 2. I know I've got a certain bias because I like strategy RPGs, and this is another strategy RPG. But God, this story, the fact that you're not following just one army, you're following a bunch of different armies. This whole story in itself is like a collective as it comes together. Not to mention the actual combat itself. There is a ton of different options and a lot of things that you don't see in other strategy RPGs. They really try to borrow from some of the RTSs, with like things like resource management and things of that nature. And yet it's simplistic enough where it's easily digestible and very easy to get into and play and just have a great time. Absolutely love this game. Wargroove 2 is phenomenal. And honestly, it's not that expensive. Totally worth it, especially if you like strategy RPGs. All right, guys. Well, that is finally it. Huge list. I get it. Like, I don't even know how the editing is going to go on this video because it's so long. And yeah, I still want to tell you guys about my last week and how it was terrifying at times. And it's not over, unfortunately. But I think I've gotten about 2 hours of sleep a day for the last week, as my daughter has just been... I don't know if it's RSV, if it's COVID, or if it's all of them, but she doesn't sleep longer than an hour, and she's up coughing and whining, and I'm not even like using that derogatory, like she's just whining, she's a baby, like that's how they do, and it's very uncomfortable, really sucks, but again, she's still kind of going through it, so don't really know what's gonna happen, we already took her to the hospital twice, and it seems like it's still sticking around. Even last night, she was up every hour, every 30 minutes. And it's so sad to me, or bothers me as a dad, because she'll help me, and it's like, I can't do anything. There's nothing I can do. She's just coughing constantly. All of us have turned up negative for everything, and most of us are healthy or healthy-ish. And so, yeah, I don't know. But we're going to continue working. We're going to get things done like we should, and yet still just be on top of her health and handle all of that. But anyway, I just wanted to tell you guys like why I was gone for a week, and I'm going to try not to do that again, and hopefully it won't come to that. Hopefully we're turning a corner. Things are going to get better. Anyway, guys, I appreciate each and every one of you. Love y'all. Bye-bye.